a brief review on equipment cleaning, some Joint Commission prep, and then our August Epic upgrade and a few other announcements. Just for starters, some safety reminders. This is being gone over hospital-wide again and again. Safety reminding to use your face shields or your goggles for all patient interactions. We've had ongoing lack of compliance in various areas of different staff, not necessarily in the operating room, but eyeglasses are not adequate protection. So anytime you are within 6 feet of a patient, or anytime you are around a coworker who is not wearing a mask, such as at mealtime, they are recommending that you have on your eye protection, either your face shield or your goggles. As a safety reminder for our patients, Tommy asked me to again mention the patient labels and the ID as part of your timeout. Always confirm, always review the accuracy of your patient armband and your labels during your pre-incision timeout, along with your consent verification. So the equipment and bed cleaning, the hospital policy has been updated, and Elise is actually working on updating our peri-op version of the equipment cleaning policy. So once she gets that completed, we'll go over that as well as to what's included in that. But just some general reminders in the meantime, and this is hospital-wide. Equipment must always be cleaned by the end user prior to it exiting the patient room. So prior to any equipment leaving the operating room, going out into the hallways, it needs to be wiped down. Do not push equipment out that has been used in a room or has been in a room during a case without cleaning it first. Any equipment that's sitting in the hallway should be clean. We should not have any dirty equipment sitting in the hallway. And we mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but just wanted to reinforce in case you missed it last time. For the blue buckets with the Oxivir 516 in them, please do not reach into the open bucket. You want to keep the lid closed, and you want the wipes to be coming up through that center pull area. And the intent is to limit the amount of solution on the wipes so that we're not ruining our equipment. We have ruined quite a few tables and flat screens with oversaturated wipes. And so please use this center pull area when you are getting your wipes. Of course, if the wipes are not coming through, you have no choice but to take the lid off and then get them coming up through the center again. There is a new smart sheet that has been created for equipment repair issues. Brian McCormick and his team have been working on this. So there are 2 ways to access this if you have an equipment issue in your room. It can be used for bear huggers, it can be used for fluid warming blankets, beds, any piece of equipment. Easy access. There is a link which I created on the peri-op website, which I have a picture of there. So right in between the CSP quality reporting QR code and the PDC stock reporting QR code is the equipment one. And then Brian is also getting laminated cards set up that have the QR code on it if you choose to use your personal smartphone to report this. They are going to be creating some blue background cards so that they are differentiated from the PDC cards which are mounted in the ORs. If you want your own personal laminated card, please just reach out to either myself or Brian McCormick or his team, and we can get you a copy of that. The Lucas device has been deployed, so I've got a picture here of its new home, living in the PACU on the wire rack on the way from the OR into the general PACU. So for those who have not completed training, you do need to arrange time to meet with an educator or one of the super users in the PACU, because we are not planning any more classes. So it'll be a one-off to get you signed off, but you need to get that done. This is a piece of emergency equipment that you would be using in the event of a code. So please get on that and get in touch with one of us to get that done. So the hospital, we did education a few weeks back on the changes to the one where they're systematizing pay practices and time practices and such across the system. So you may have not seen it, but there was an email that was sent out Tuesday to all staff with an update to that original information. So the leadership team listened to the feedback from staff and have made a revision with regards to the use of your existing sick leave bank, which they're now going to be calling your reserved sick leave bank. So originally when we had the presentation, they talked about if you needed to take a leave for a serious medical condition, that you would need to use all of your PTO. So what would be your vacation time, holiday time, and what would have been future sick time first. And then once that was all used up, you would go to your reserved sick bank. That was a major dissatisfier. And so they have come back and revised that policy. So if you are required to take a leave for a serious medical condition that would typically qualify for FMLA, you will be able to first use your reserved sick bank time, if you have it, before you use your PTO. So that's a big change, and they really responded to our requests on that. So good news there. And then just an update on the work week start change. Instead of being midnight Saturday night going into Sunday, the payroll week will start at 7:30 a.m. on Sunday and go to 7:29 a.m. the following Sunday. And originally we were talking about starting this in September, but now that has been pushed back to October 25th. We do have new tourniquets. If you weren't aware, the existing tourniquets that we had no longer repairable and were all pretty much out of commission. So we have new Zimmer 4000 tourniquets. I have a little video here. It literally takes 8 minutes. And so let me play it for you. Essentially, the function is very similar to the prior tourniquets that we had. However, there is now a touch screen, and there's a few little nuances that you do need to be aware of. So I'm going to play the video, and then we'll come back after that. Now, continuing on. Cleaning instructions on the tourniquets. Let me get my box up here. Did speak with the company rep and check the manual, and they do recommend using a dampened but not dripping wipe with alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, to clean the touch screens, the hoses, the sensor, if you're using that between patient uses. We should not be using the Oxivir. That's a disinfectant, and at the very most, they want a mild detergent. So stick with the alcohol across the board, and you'll be good there. All right, so Joint Commission. Some of you have been through Joint Commission surveys before, but we do have quite a few people who have not. So I just wanted to give a little background on Joint Commission survey readiness. So if you're not familiar, Joint Commission is the accrediting organization that we pay to participate in. They do come every 3 years, triannually, to survey the hospital, and they look at our quality of care that we're delivering to our patients. In general, a team of surveyors arrives to cover the facility over about a 3 to 5 day period, depending on the timing and the size of the facility. So what do they know about us before they even walk in the door? Well, they know quite a bit. First of all, there's an application that gets submitted in advance, prepared and submitted by the regulatory. They have access to any complaints that have been submitted to CMS by patients or family members. They have our core measures, which are publicly reported data. They have our previous surveys and any sightings that we have had issues with in the past, any other visits that they've done. In addition to the core measures, they look at our HCAP scores. So they look at those patient satisfaction surveys that get done, as well as our infection rates and such. They have information on any reported sentinel events that have gone out. And then, of course, there is our public website, what we say about what we do to the public. And they are very good at finding non-compliance. So what do they look for? Two biggies at the top of the list are not following policy and incomplete documentation. So they look at our policies, they look at what we say we're going to do according to our policies, And then they look to see if we're actually doing it. They look at what we say in policy needs to be documented, and then they're going to look to see if we're actually doing it. High button ticket items that they look at are things like histories and physicals, restraint documentation, and that's something that we have talked about over the last 6 months or so. We've talked about documenting removal of restraints when patients come down from a unit. Post-op notes, so physician documentation, infection prevention, language. If you have a patient with a foreign language, English as a second language or not at all, what are we doing for interpretation? Culture, any cultural sensitivity issues in terms of race or ethnicity, whatever is going to be going on with the patient. How do we address ADA issues with disabilities and complaints there? National Patient Safety Goals, handoff. Any transition of care is a high-risk area, so they're going to be looking at that process. Patient flow through the hospital, and then pain management. Now, in some of the other areas, they're looking at things like alarm fatigue. They're going to look at moderate sedation in our endo suites and ICUs. Look at visitation practices, and then communication among ourselves and to our providers regarding patient requests and such. So what puts us at risk for non-compliance and errors? So I love this little lady down here. She's multitasking like a banshee, but that sets us up for trouble. Process variations and lack of standardization. So you hear a lot of talk about standardizing workflows. You hear a lot of talk about use of checklists to standardize what we're doing so that everyone is doing the same process the same way. Incomplete handoff. We're in a hurry and we forget to tell the next person at the next level of care critical issues that they should know about the patient. Interruptions. Do we have any interruptions in the OR? Yes, nonstop. And worker fatigue, poor accountability, and just general human factors. So strategies that they look for that help us succeed are creating processes that promote best practice, number one, and standardizing those practices so that it's easy to follow. Removing any kind of barriers that are in the way. So you all know we've implemented something and we realized after we started that there's this big barrier that we didn't know about or we didn't address beforehand, and so we fail. So that's part of leadership's goal and role is to remove those barriers, to analyze the systems and what's happening, to make sure that it's easier for everyone to do the right thing. And then avoiding reliance on memory. So hence the checklists that we see, the pre-op checklist, the end of case debrief checklist. When we rely on memory and we're in a hurry and we're being rushed, we forget things. It's just human nature. So the Joint Commission visit, we are expecting them to come anytime over the next few months. They could walk in next Monday morning if we wanted. The goal is really for us to talk about the quality stuff that we do every day and the way that we advocate for our patients on a daily basis. So if you are the lucky person that has a Joint Commission surveyor come in your room and ask about your patient, take pride in what you do and look at it as an opportunity to showcase the great work you do every day. That way we're always prepared. So, little joke, you know, people see the Joint Commission surveyor, everybody heads for the hills and hides. Please don't hide. Please welcome them to the unit if you see them, if they come in your room, and grab a friend. There's power in numbers. So they don't really want to hear from the managers or the educators, although they do hear and how you do things. So you want to make sure you know your patient's reason for their admission and their plan of care, hence why we talked about patient care plans, right? With our RN boot camp, when we did all the surge training, what is the plan of care for your patient in surgery based on their history? Individualized, measurable goals, okay? You want to be prepared to navigate the electronic medical record with them. Many of you in the room don't recognize that item on the lower right there, but for some of us who've been working at this for a while, those computers look familiar. You want to try to avoid words like usually, I try, or sometimes. Talk about what you do consistently every time with your patients and answer only what they're asking. So if you don't understand the question, don't guess. Ask them to rephrase it or ask them to repeat it. If you're not sure what they're asking for, they may ask the question in such a way that it is kind of a general fishing expedition. And if you start talking about 20 million things, then that just opens up another road for them to go down and ask about. So if they're asking about A, answer about A. If they're asking about B, answer about B. And you don't need to elaborate beyond that. Now, it is okay, like I said, grab a friend, groups and numbers. It is okay to refer to your badge. It's okay to say, I know there's a policy on that. I don't do that every single day, but I know where the policy is. I know how to look it up, and I know that I can refer to that. Or you can say, I know we've gone over that, but I don't do that every single day. I can refer to my educator. I can refer to the PeriOp website. I can call my manager, or I don't remember it in detail, but I know where to find it. That's the most important thing. Saying that you don't know where something is and you don't know how to find the resource, that's concerning. But if you say, I don't know, but I know where to get the information, that is perfectly acceptable. So typical questions they might ask about surgical infections and what we do to prevent surgical site infections, and what kind of quality indicators do we look at in PeriOp. So I put the link there on the PeriOp website on the left-hand side. There is the PeriOp quality data that gets posted every month, almost every month when there is a quality meeting. I try to bring back some of that on some of our Thursday morning meetings, but I don't bring it all because it's not all necessarily pertinent to the OR nurse or the surgical tech's role. And then being able to describe the handoff process. And this applies to everybody, nurse, surgical tech. What do you do when you go for relief? What kind of report do you give when you're leaving the room for the day? How do you report off to the PACU? How do you get report from the ASCU when you're going to pick up your patient? So being able to speak to that process is very important. Some other typical things they might ask about: what's your event in the role of your role in the event of a fire? And we're going to be doing some work around that later, hopefully this month or early next month. What kind of cleaning products do we use? What are their names? What are their dwell times, right? So Oxivir 516, that's the product that we have in our blue buckets and on the floors. It has a 5-minute dwell time. Oxivir TB, that's in the white dispensers. That's a 1-minute dwell time for general microorganisms. Dispatch, which is our bleach product, is a 3-minute dwell time. So make sure you have those emblazoned in your brain. And then this is a new one, but what would you do if an active shooter is in the building? So according to security, it is run, hide, or fight. Try to protect yourself so that you can survive to take care of other patients. Environment of care and infection control are two huge areas. So you all know this, but no food or drink behind the red line. No unsecured meds. So you should not be leaving medications sitting around in a room unattended. You should not be leaving them sitting out on top of the Pyxis machine in the alcove. I have instructions, very detailed, step-by-step, very easy to follow, posted on the gray return bin that's up on the wall in the cubby for returning generic returns. So you can return your GOR nursing kit, you can return your irrigations, you can return your thrombins using those generic return process. And then minimizing hallway clutter. This is a huge one. If you are pushing equipment out, like I said earlier, anesthesia techs or equipment techs can be called to come and pick the equipment up so it's not left sitting in the hallway. Oxygen tanks is another big area, so you want to make sure that your oxygen tanks are never placed directly on the floor. They should always be placed in that rack underneath your table, table there in the OR. If you don't have one, or if your rack's broken, please see Tommy and get that repaired. They do recommend, hospital policy is that you recommend only using full oxygen tanks for transport. Now that really pertains more to patients who are, for instance, going from the ICU to MRI for a study and then coming back, where they're gone for an extended long period of time. Most of our transports are just a few minutes, 5-10 minutes at the most, going up, dropping them off in a unit. But they still do recommend using only the full tanks. So if it gets down to the partial area, then go ahead and change it out and get yourself a new tank. You want to make sure you know where the medical gas shutoff valves are, in the hallway outside your room, and only the charge nurse manager can authorize that oxygen be shut off. This was new to me. They do recommend that if the medical gases are ever shut off, that we do need to call our facilities at 85174 so that they are aware and can make any adjustments, corrections, etc. And then we want to be able to speak to our process for enhanced respiratory precautions. So what do we do for respiratory precautions, enhanced respiratory precautions during COVID, right? We do universal masking. We do face shields and goggles in addition to our masks when we're within 6 feet of any patient or an unmasked staff member. Gowns and gloves as indicated for exposure to blood and body fluids. And then respirator use for all aerosol generating procedures. And in peri-op, the guideline is that respirators be used throughout all procedures within peri-op. And then covering our respirator masks with a surgical mask to keep those clean and preserve them. All right, so that's it for Joint Commission for today. We're going to talk some more about that in the coming weeks. I want to do a little bit at a time, but I just wanted to get started on that and give some intro, get you thinking about it. So for the nurses in the room, Epic upgrades August 13th, next Thursday. There's going to be a major upgrade done. They're taking 3/4 worth of upgrades from Epic to optimize our system. So there is a link here, which I have included on the homepage under portfolio information on upgrades. And there's a presentation there specifically for peri-op, and there's one for inpatient nursing. And what I have done is I've sort of consolidated that here. We'll go over those quickly. There's also a link here that shows you that Learning Home dashboard, which is the area that the Epic team would like you to go to for any kind of review or preparation if you want to go in and learn more about anything in the Epic world. So first and foremost, there's going to be a new line for COVID status on the storyboard. And I have a picture of this on the next screen. So if the patient is a PUI, you're going to see an orange bar. If they're COVID confirmed, you're going to see a red bar. And if they're COVID recovered, you're going to see a green bar. There's a new section for e-cigarettes and vaping. Note list is collapsible. If you have patients with similar names on the SNAP board, as we have here, Summer Optime and Glitter Optime, you'll see that little icon with the two people next to that on the left. That indicates that there's another patient on the unit that day with the same last name. So it's just a visual cue for you to make sure that you pick the correct patient. There are quite a few new capabilities in case entry. Most of the nurses are not doing anything with that, but that is available for people who are posting cases. And there's a couple of new options under incision closure details. So first of all, here's the banner. On the left, there is a banner for a confidential patient. And then on the right, the three there, you see the yellow where it says COVID PUI, the red where it says COVID confirmed, and the green where it says COVID recovered. There is also a new indication for a patient with incongruent sex. So if you have someone with either transsexual or indiscriminate genitalia. You see this information icon next to the patient's sex and storyboard. If you hover over that, it will activate a short summary that will indicate and explain the mismatch between the patient's reported sex and their obstetric history. So for instance, in this one case, the legal sex is male, but physiologically female. Cost receipt, we've done some talk about cost receipts that are being made available to the surgeons. They're being sent to them. They have added a link in our inter-procedure toolbar for the cost receipt if the surgeon were to want to look at it immediately in the operating room at the time of surgery. So if you click on that cost receipt button, it will open up with the average, with the cost for that particular case, and it will compare to their average cost, and it'll compare their average to their peers for that procedure. There are quite a few new reports available for managers, and I'm not going to go over those here. On the storyboard, if your patient has multiple procedures scheduled, next to the procedure name word, their procedures, you see one of three. That will indicate that this is just one of multiple procedures. So if you hover over the procedures on the left side on the storyboard, you'll see all three procedures listed that are scheduled. So it may be one of three, one of four, one of five, depending on your patient. I mentioned the e-cigarettes. So previously, there was a line under the tobacco section, and they've separated that out so that the pre-op nurses can put in more detail with regards to vaping and e-cigarette history. So it is still in the pre-op nurses history section, but it's its own separate section. And then I mentioned on the incision closure, the new options that are available. There's one for no layers closed / incision left open, which we did not have before. So you would use that for a case that patient was packed. And then no incision NA for obviously a patient with no incision. And then in the implant screen in Epic, this really applies more to other facilities that do all of their documentation in Epic. Currently, we're documenting this in TIMS, but if you were to be doing documentation in Epic on your tissue preparation, there's the capability to copy the tissue preparation data from a previous tissue implant onto the next implant. So if you were doing multiples, it would eliminate some of the documentation, repetitive documentation that you need to do. So it copies the date and time that the tissue comes to the OR, the time the preparation was started, and the time the preparation was finished. There was a request to minimize the waste of the green gowns and the bunny suits for warmth. I understand. I totally understand, because I've been freezing for the last 3 weeks since we don't have any jackets. But the green gowns do cost money to be processed and sent out and sterilized. And the bunny suits we need to preserve in the event that we need them for PPE for patients, for people coming into the operating room. So please do not use the green gowns or the bunny suits as jackets. And then for all the nurses who received awards on Nurses Week, those were all announced in May. Congratulations again to everybody. Please see Tommy. Tommy has all of your certificates. So if you were a Nurses Week Award winner, please see Tommy and pick that up. And then on one last note, just a happy celebration to Miss Rose, who is celebrating a birthday this weekend. Little bunny whispered that in my ear. So happy birthday, Miss Rose. And that is it. Everybody have a good day.